Hey, welcome to episode 19 of Worth 1000 Words. My name is Jason and I write stuff. This is the series where I write a 1000 word short story based on a piece of artwork with no outline. And today's artwork is deceptively complex. It's a very simple piece, but it speaks volumes. It really does tell a story of 1,000 words, if not more. And I'll talk more about why when we get to the artwork, but before I get there, let's talk about the music that I listened to accompany the writing. The visual struck me as something that was more subdued, nothing fast-paced. It's not a lot of high action. So I went back to one of my old favorites, Lawsill, also known as Scott Morgan. He's an ambient artist. I believe he's actually the first artist who got me into that genre. And to this day, I listen to him quite often. He's very prolific, he's very unique, and you can tell that a lot of other ambient artists were highly influenced by him. So I encourage you to check this album out. It's called Monument Builders. It came out in 2016. Something about the cover, and when I started listening to the first couple tracks and remembering what it sounded like, I felt like it was a good fit. And one last thing, I'm always looking for suggestions. If you have a submission of a piece of artwork you'd like me to write a story to, please post in the comments. I would love it. I've done it a couple times, so I look forward to your recommendations. Anyway, let's move on to the artwork. Today's artwork is titled Megacity, and it is by an artist called Astero from Japan. And I think this piece of art really exemplifies what I look for and appreciate, especially when doing these exercises. And that is conflict. Now, you see a lot of pieces of art everywhere, even ones that I've actually written stories to, where I have to find the conflict, I have to fabricate it. It's not present in the image. But this one does. This one has it very clearly, very simply, and that's why I love it so much. We have a moment in time, these two characters, one of them overlooking some vast mega city, and one in the shadow aiming a gun at her. And if that doesn't define conflict or a tense situation, I don't know what does. And so, Estero, I really appreciate you taking the time and the care to put this into the artwork, especially because most artwork I find on here is just landscape or character or just trying to capture an interesting scene. And I'm not talking about conflict as in battle. That's ordinary, that's expected. You see that all over the place. Something a little more interesting. And that's really what drew me to this image. I also like that it's not just riddled with detail, right? It's simple. There's not a lot of going on. We have these two characters, one that is in the light, one that is in the darkness, signifying exactly what their roles are to be. And that is the reason why I chose this piece. Now, it's not anything amazing, I feel like, at first glance to look at, but once you really stare at it for a bit and really pay attention to what's going on, I think you will find too how great this artwork really is. So Estero, thank you for the inspiration. Now it's time to take a look at my take of what the story is between these two characters. So let's see what I came up with. The room was larger than he remembered. An eternity, the walk. An eternity too brief. The stairs, 3 mountains stacked. Impassable. He wished to catch his breath. The trek had been too long. There was no time for breathing. Climbing them took everything he had. He didn't touch the rails. Couldn't. The floor at the top of the stairs was ice. Cold, slick, a lake with a dark bottom, full of things waiting for him to step in the right spot to bring it crashing down. He wasn't so lucky. The wall was a window to a galaxy, full of life, full of movement, the bottom of which he could not see, not from here. Even standing at the edge, he knew it impossible. And what would be there to see? The gravestones of what came before. Never look down, she had always told him. He'd never questioned the advice. And she was at the center of it all, this galaxy, observing her creation. Did she look at it with eyes of love, hate, hope? They weren't questions. At his side, the gun vibrated, anxious. He wished it would quiet itself. The room was so quiet. He lifted the gun in hopes that the action would satiate it for a time. It seemed to, but it was heavy. 2 hands it required, and even then it was an effort. She looked down. His breath caught in his chest. The gun became heavier, his forearms screaming. His fingers were as wet as the ice melting at his feet. The creatures below grew ravenous. Never looked down. "That was for you," she said. "Not me." She read his mind. She knew he was here. What a fool he was, thinking he could get the better of her and end this quickly, painlessly. Would it hurt? Would it matter? He opened his mouth. It dried in silence. A cargo vessel trundled by. The exhaust of the city streamed to the lights running along the vessel as if feeding. So many lights. So many directions. Like the rising buildings, if that word could even describe what they were. Where people looked out. Did they? Or did they stare at their own lights inside, backs to the world outside, the constellations that weren't? She waited for it to pass before she spoke again. "We," she said. "Not I." His shoe squeaked on the floor. He heard the snap of jaws inches below the surface. "Why do you refuse to take credit?" she asked. "Why do you resist?" His lips had fused. The gun was his only voice, but he couldn't make it talk either, and it wanted to say so much. "The view is better from here," she said. "You'll see." The invitation was tempting, hard to resist. Knees locked, his legs slid across the too smooth floor. The jaws below ceased their snapping, swam away in search of other prey. "Take the shot." He could make out individual strands of her hair now. It even seemed to part to reveal her pale scalp. A clear target. There was a freckle among the follicles. The same color as the one on his cheek, the same size. Mad. He was going mad. His collar flared up to his nose and scratched it furiously. He smelled his own hot breath, and it smelled like nothing. "Do you remember when you wanted to dye your hair because it was the same color as mine?" she asked. He could hear her smile. "Wanting so much to be different. Wanting so much to be apart." She looked again at her creation. She turned enough for him to see the swell of her cheekbone. There was no freckle. "We have a bond you cannot break," she said. "Why do you fight it so?" Inches he was from her now. He could smell her. She smelled like nothing. "The blood is on your hands," she said. "Just follow the path you made, and you will see." He raised the gun to let his sleeves slide away from his hands. They looked like red gloves, shiny red gloves. He flexed his hands and a drop made its way to the black floor and looked back at him. And he looked back. The way he had come. Boot prints, ending at his heels and winding back into the darkness to be illuminated again by the glowing door he had left ajar. The gun pushed through her hair, and she nuzzled it, finally turning her face to him. She kissed its side, a single blip of light near the front of the barrel illuminating her face. It looked like his. She smiled an open-mouthed smile, which turned into just an open mouth, wide enough to fit the barrel in. She closed her eyes. He pulled the trigger. No sound. No pain. No spatter of brain upon the window framing the world she had created. Not him. She breathed in, out. She opened her eyes and released the barrel from her mouth. "I told you, brother. We have a bond you cannot break." He let the gun fall. It didn't clatter. It landed on its side, the tiny light looking up at him with regret because even it had broken its promise. The promise it had whispered to him all the way here, shown him through the color red that flashed in his mind now. Fragments of what he had done. She had done. But had she? They were the same. They had a bond that could not be broken. "Come," she said, taking his bloody hands in hers, paying no mind to the stickiness made up of their entire family who lay slaughtered in hallways and rooms, which his mind, perhaps coaxed by hers, allowed him to recall. But it didn't bother him, somehow. He joined her side, looking upon their creation. Yes, that was the word he had forgotten. He felt his chin dip, but she caught it with a finger. Never look down, she said. With this story, at least the process of this story, I did it a little bit differently. I kind of went back to my old methods of writing slowly and deliberately and not just kind of vomiting it all out. Now, I know that a lot of writers recommend the first draft to be something where you just, like I said, vomit all the words out and go back and fix it later. And I did that for NaNoWriMo. And I feel like there's some good things about it and some bad things about it. What I find here, or what I found here, and what you will see is that I had to edit far less than normal. And that was even toward the end when I was trying to just really remove one or two single words, which was actually a challenge because I felt like I was relatively happy with everything else. So anyway, on to the story. What were my thoughts? Well, I wanted to um, make the trek across this room, make this character on the left holding the gun. I wanted him to take a while to get to his point because I knew once I reached this point, it was toward the end, toward the climax. And so you can see here I'm comparing the stairs to mountains, even the dark floor that he's standing on to a lake, and then adding a little bit of subtext um, to things are waiting for him, dark with a dark bottom, full of things waiting for him to step into the right spot to bring it all crashing down. And I use that throughout, and it's kind of just no, there's not really creatures under there. It's not really ice. It's all metaphor, but I think it really helps. It's a good demonstration to show how he's feeling approaching this woman who's looking outside the window. And I do a little bit of world building there. There's not much in this, but I felt like that was the best thing for the story. I thought what was more powerful was what was going to happen between these two characters. But I alluded to it because you just have to when you want to get in the heads of the characters, right? You have to refer to things as they would refer them, see them as they see them. And here I have him hesitant in what he knows he has to do, which is kill this person at the window. And then I I personify the gun he has at his side. And you can see here I started with pistol, and I think I changed it to gun later on, and that was really I should have had a better word. I think that's when my one regret to this story is I wish I would have come up with some kind of world building term for that gun, because always be specific. That's sort of a tenet of writing, at least that I've learned. And here I am inching toward this contact, this moment you see before you in this painting. And I'm only 283 words in, and I'm already starting a dialogue. And I think what was interesting is that the man with the gun, or the boy or the young man, he never speaks in the entire thing. And I wasn't sure if I was going to have him speak at the end, and then I think now that you know more about the story and about that they're essentially brother and sister or twins even, that they feel this connection, they're almost like one unit. And there's always these uncanny relationships between twins, how they've reported to feel the same things or react to the same way, and it's almost like beyond personality. And so I was playing with that here. I didn't know what I was doing quite yet, but that is where it ended up being, and I definitely emphasized that as it goes. And I start here when he thinks never look down. And she speaks, that was for you, not me. Meaning like that line was, and so he believes she's reading his mind, or that they're sharing thoughts, or or something of that sort. And that really is where I begin the idea of them having that connection. And now I wanted to paint a little bit of the picture outside the window because I believe it's worth noting for sure. I mean, the entire piece or the artwork is titled Megacity, so I felt like I had to address it in some way. I know I only talk about some kind of a cargo vessel, but I also talk about the lights in the buildings, and I'm trying to convey this world that apparently she has created. But here she counters with we, not I. And so that's seeding the idea that it's not her. It's not just her. And once again, it's an example of where there could be a lot of exposition a lot of exposition explaining who these people are to each other, what they've accomplished, what went down, what brought them to this point. But what I'm doing is just creating that tension through dialogue, and hopefully you can kind of come to some kind of understanding as to what the relationship is together. And here she's egging him on, or trying to entice him to come to the window. She's definitely in the power right now. She's in power. She owns this interaction, even though he's the one with a gun. And here I, take the shot, take it. And then I remembered I did something just like that in a previous story. And so I removed that later. And she's allowing him to get closer and closer here so he can, described in the way that he can see every strand on her hair now. And then even her hair parted to show her scalp. And I decided here that I was going to create a target of some kind, but it's another link, right? So there was a freckle the same color as the one on his cheek. So that once again, that is linking them to it, is showing the relationship. And hopefully by now, as a reader, you understand that there is a very close relation here. But still, he sees it, and he says mad. He was going mad. His collar flared up to his nose, and really that's just to get the image from what I'm looking at here into, on the page, is that he has this massive collar of some kind, and I wanted to make sure that I describe that, but then also not just describe it for visual purposes, but use it as a point of tension. And here I really hammer in the fact that, do you remember when you wanted to cut your hair because it was the same color as mine? Change that to dye, but you get the idea. And you can tell here that, as I said, she is in the position of power. She is controlling this entire confrontation, and she's also explaining through exposition how he wants to be different. He wants to be apart. But I think it works in that sense because it still sounds like conversation. It doesn't sound like a big info dump. And then she turned him, and I decided, like, okay, well, I need to show her to some degree at this point. I need for, now that he is close to her, ready to do whatever it is he's going to do, presumably fire this gun and try to kill her, she needs to confront this head on, literally. Here I am changing pistol back to gun, and once again, I would change that to something a little more colorful, I think, a little more specific. It's like saying car instead of saying Honda Civic, right? Honda Civic really brings an image to your mind more so than car. And I had no idea where I was going to go. I know there had to be a confrontation because it is shown in this painting, and it's a very pivotal moment of some kind. But I knew there had to be some kind of hook, some kind of twist that was unexpected. At least I hope it was. And so she says, the blood is on your hands. Just follow the trail. And then he looks at his hands and he does notice they're covered in blood. And this is, I think previously when I mentioned his hands were slick. And I think hopefully from the reader's perspective, because what I want to do is I always try to write in a close narrative, right? A close POV. So if it's third person, it's very close POV, meaning you could almost change all of the he's or she's to I's and it would be the same. That's what I attempt to do every time I write anyway. I really prefer that to being omniscient or anything. But anyway, you can tell here she has no fear at all. She kissed the gun's side, and then opens her mouth and then puts the barrel inside it. And I know that's a bit of a cliche image, but I felt like it worked here. At least you can tell me if it didn't. But he does pull the trigger. He still does. I think that maybe is the one element that I added that wasn't cliche, rather than being sort of tricked out of what he wanted to do. He does it anyway, but it just doesn't work. And this leads back to, it's for you. Yeah, I told you, brother, we have a bond you cannot break. Meaning that, maybe there is some kind of bioscanner or some kind of element that does not allow this weapon to kill someone of the same blood. And once again, I personify the weapon with a tiny light looking up at him with regret because even it had broken its promise. I enjoy that because I think sometimes we look at inanimate objects or, really anything that has no sentience, and sometimes we put blame on them. And so I thought that would be interesting. And here I just spill it all out really quick in a couple of sentences. That he had forgotten what he had done. He had killed these people. The blood on his hands and the blood that led to him from the door was because of him. And she asks him to come again, to join her at the window. And she's not turned off at all by the blood on his hands, made up of their entire family who lay slaughtered in hallways and rooms. And so I think this was kind of the trigger to where he remembered what he did. Or maybe he was in some kind of fugue, and why did he go on this rampage? And I think what I'm playing with is the fact that they're one unit, right? Their wants and are the same, despite what kind of logic might be going through their heads through this time. So what I was trying to do is make sure that the reader understood that there was a very strong bond between these two people. And even though the young man, wanted to fight against that, it's just something he couldn't win. And so he finally just conceded and joined her in this, quote unquote, I guess, kingdom of some kind that presumably they had built. Maybe they're a royal family or something like that. And why she or they wanted to kill the family, I'm not sure. Maybe they felt like it was time for a new regime and a less of an antiquated way of going about things. I'm not sure. I think it really just speaks to the idea that the youth always think they know better. And these two in particular seemed a little bit more youthful. And then the never look down. I brought it back toward the end. It's actually the last line of the story. And you can see I'm here at 1,000 even. And it took me some time. It took me about an hour, and I believe I ended an hour and 9 minutes total in writing time, which isn't terribly long considering I wrote much more slowly. So I think this was an interesting experiment to kind of compare what it's like to just kind of spit words out and then having to do some heavy editing versus just taking your time, letting the scene slowly unfold, because especially in this scene, right, there's not a lot of action happening. It's very static, really. But I think that's what makes it powerful, is that you can see this in your mind. Because I think that, or I should say, you can see what happened before and maybe what's going to happen after in your head. And a lot of paintings are in motion, and I think that's great too. I think I love it when it's kind of a freeze frame of just a split second. But there's something about this image that it could be minutes or hours even, while these two characters converse and just go back and forth on what it is they're going to do. And so, yeah, I wanted to make the last line "never look down" because that was sort of the first clue, his thought that, or what she had told him, that set off everything to where he thought she was reading his mind, and first established that there was this strange connection between them. And I'm at 1,001 words, and you'll see here as I scroll down and up and down, and I'm really trying to remove one word, and it was tough. I think I spent far too long doing this, like the last, yeah, I guess like 5 minutes or so. And I guess that is definitely the downside of writing as precisely as you can on the first draft. Now, normally that doesn't matter because word counts don't really matter. Whereas I'm trying to hit 1,000 even, it does. So I'm trying to just rephrase some things, maybe make them a little more powerful, waffling back and forth on some dialogue. But I eventually made it. So I was happy with it. And this story was a great example as well for myself of really having no idea and being somewhat intimidated by the art because it does show such a powerful image. And then figuring it out midway through. And that's it. Welcome to the end. Welcome to my final thoughts, also known as what I learned, also known as did I succeed or fail? And I think I succeeded in this. Now, when I first went into it, as I said in the narration, it was a bit intimidating. It was somewhat like the Evil Book 2 art I did way back. I'll post a picture here or a link here so you can go back and see that story. Now, that story was one that I wasn't completely satisfied with. I haven't read it since, so I'm not sure if my opinions changed, but the artwork was so great that I didn't know if I could live up to the quality. And I don't think I did. Maybe I was being too hard on myself, but I felt somewhat the same way about this. Right when I started, I had no idea where this was going to end. I knew there had to be a confrontation of some kind. I had to have the payoff. I had to have the gunfire, even though it didn't. He pulled the trigger, so I think it counts. As Chekhov always says, the gun must go off, right? With this story, I think what I got most out of it was more of an approach, right? So rather than just spitting out all the words sloppily as quickly as I can in rough draft fashion, I took my time with it. I used to write this way when I wrote my first novel, and then the second novel, I slowed down a bit. And it takes me a little bit longer to get through a chapter or get the words out in general, but I find that I'm a little more happy with the words when I do it that way. Seeing as though I ended this story at 1 hour and 8 minutes, and the last 5 minutes or so were just trying to remove 1 or 2 words or add 1 word, I feel like this method works. It gives me some time to soak in what's happening, right? To feel the feelings of these characters, to hear their thoughts, to immerse myself in it. And I think sometimes when you're writing quickly, you lose sight of that, right? And I know a lot of people might argue that that's something you do in draft 2 and draft 3, but there's something about atmosphere. There's something about deep character work that I like to dive into right away. That's what I did here. I did go back and clean up some stuff after the fact, but very little editing happened. I was pretty happy with the words I'd written the first time. I felt they conveyed the emotions of the characters. I felt like they set the stage and created the conflict and hopefully created a satisfying resolution. I'm always playing with how I approach writing. Do I meticulously outline? Do I not outline at all? Do I write quickly? Do I write slowly? And these 1,000-word chunks are a great opportunity for me to play with those things. I'm playing with that now on my live streams with the current work in progress, the novel I'm working on, A Caretaker for the Forgotten Dead. I don't think there's one way for every writer, and I don't think that there's one way for myself. Sometimes I feel like it's just where the story needs to go, how I need to put it on paper. Do I need to figure stuff out ahead of time? Or am I so ready to go and I see the character and I feel the character that I should just do it and not worry about the details and just focus on where the character is going to take me? So I know this is kind of the bane of all writers, so I encourage you to try different methods, right? Don't think that you have to stick to one. Don't even think that you have to stick to outlining first and then writing. Maybe you write a chapter or two and then you go back to outlining, or vice versa. I have read many books on craft and tried to find the right way for myself, and I've yet to find it. I'm still looking for it. And as I said, maybe there isn't one right way. Maybe it depends on my mood. Maybe it depends on the story. So if you are out there watching this right now and trying to find that one way and are frustrated by it, don't let that stop you. Just start writing, start one way, then drop it, then continue another way, because that's what I'm doing. I don't know if we ever truly figure it out. Beside the craft of the story, let's talk about the story of the story. And I really enjoyed creating the connection between these two characters. I wasn't sure if they'd be related or if this man was like a hitman of some kind sent to assassinate some royal figure. I have no idea. Did this room they were in hold some kind of significance to the relationship? And the fact that they did look similar to me, and because these two characters look similar to me, I went the familial route. And I'm overall pretty happy with how it ended up. I did feel like there was a little bit of cliche action with the girl putting her mouth over the gun, but then he did fire it, right? Or he intended to fire it. The mechanism went off. It just wasn't the outcome he expected. If you really kind of peel back the layers, and I could be bullshitting you here, I don't know, but I'm just thinking out loud right now, is that sometimes we try to run away from who we are. And I think that's what she was trying to pose to him, is that he was this person and he was fighting against it and he just needed to give in, or there's really no way he could win the battle. And another element I liked is I never named these characters. They were simply he and she. There's something intriguing about that because you wonder, who are they? What are their names? I think I established that maybe they were part of a powerful family and created this mega city. But that's really all you know. Why he killed or they killed their family, what their plans are next. Hopefully I planted the seed in your mind to sort of come to your own conclusions for that. And I think that's what I like most about storytelling, is that don't try to explain everything. Please don't. Leave some mystery, maybe not too much, but enough to where the readers will continue the story for themselves. And I think that's the most powerful way of leaving someone with your writing, is that they carry it with them long after they finished. I think that's the goal of any writer. That's my goal anyway. Whether or not my stories achieve that, that's what I'm going for. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I had a good time. I learned a lot. I believed in myself. Even though when I first approached this artwork that I'm looking at right now, I immediately said, I got to do that one. And then when I sat down and started recording the writing, I was like, what the hell am I going to write about? And thankfully, my subconscious helped me out. So let me know what you thought in the comments below. Don't forget, as I mentioned in the intro, give me some submissions. I'm sure you have some artwork out there that you admire or that you've seen recently that just brings a story to mind. And keep reading and keep writing, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye. If you'd like to read this story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't add anything else. Promise. Thanks again.